There's just, abundance of films specifically made for Netflix where CIA agents, be they women agents or men agents, are the heroes, are the protagonists. Basically, the film revolves around an agent who is a CIA agent. I remember like films from the 80s, the 70s, the 60s. CIA agents were they weren't shown in a positive way. But however, since I think the 2000s, whenever it was, when they opened the Liaison office and they learned from the Pentagon or from the Department of Defense to actually liaise with the filmmakers because it's in their benefit, and give them some kind of access here and there, but then demand for them to have access to the script. It feels like Netflix has gone even beyond that and is trying to present the CIA where Donald Trump, at some times they talk about wrapping it up because it's just so dangerous, which they will never do because they're using it right now to attack Venezuela and other places. That the CIA, being part of the deep state, is just trying to be shown in such a positive light that when CIA is mentioned now, it's not such a negative term anymore like it was 30, 40 years ago. Can you just talk about that? What if you've noticed that as well in Netflix and other films, like, for example, Argo that came out, things like that? Have you noticed there's been a shift in the deep state trying to utilize films, Hollywood? And I include Netflix in Hollywood now because Netflix is basically the modern interpretation of Hollywood, right? Along with the major studios. Well, what's your views on that?
Yeah, I agree. I mean, Venezuela is an interesting case, just given the situation in Venezuela that's escalated over the past 2 or 3 weeks, where the United States has parked a massive aircraft carrier off its shore and has been blowing out of the water various small ships, supposedly because they're packed with drug dealers. But I don't think anyone actually takes that remotely seriously. The only substance that Venezuela has of any interest is oil, not cocaine, or fentanyl for that matter. So Venezuela is being presented very negatively under the Maduro government. It has been since the 90s, and the efforts to present it badly in the media have arguably been escalated. Certainly in terms of entertainment products, it's interesting that there was a Jack Ryan TV series on, I think it was on Amazon Prime, actually, a couple of years ago. I don't think it was Netflix. There was a Jack Ryan series where they speculated about Venezuela trying to acquire a nuclear weapon. Do you remember this, Razor? They dramatized the idea that Venezuela was trying to acquire a nuke, and they even said in the trailer to the film, if Venezuela acquires a nuclear weapon, then there will be no New York tomorrow. So, the idea that Venezuela is even more insane than these other insane dictators that have been around the world. So Venezuela is an interesting case. Jack Ryan being used as to dramatize that situation in a negative way, and in general about the CIA. Absolutely. I mean, I think it's a slightly more nuanced situation over the past 80 years of the CIA's existence, or coming up 80 years. In terms of its involvement with the entertainment industry, there was certainly a period in the 1970s and 80s, as you very astutely identify, Razor, where the CIA was being used as a kind of default bad guy, particularly the kind of rogue CIA villain. And this even goes up to the Oliver Stone movie JFK from 1991, of course, where the CIA is quite explicitly shown to be the assassin, the conspirators behind the assassination of President Kennedy. And there was a concerted effort. In fact, there was a movie in the early 90s, which I think was, I always forget it, but it's one, forget the name, but I think it's one with John Malkovich, where he plays another one of these disgruntled CIA agents who tries to murder a politician. And I see the names skip my mind for the moment, but it was around about that period, early 1990s, where the CIA said, look, we've had enough of this. We've had the last decade or two being presented as default baddies, and we don't want that anymore. And that's when they brought in Chase Brandon, who was a very well-connected, very smart, very shrewd CIA operative who had been behind enemy lines in various different theaters of conflict, but also had a cousin in Tommy Lee Jones and lots of connections in Hollywood. And Chase did a very thorough and involved job from the mid 1990s in manipulating behind the scenes and getting in very early on TV series like 24, for example, without really a great deal of detection or fanfare. So he was able to make huge changes there. And then the CIA has been professionalized as an organization within Hollywood since then. I would just make a quick note, just because it was very interesting when Tom Secker and I were doing the historiography on this about the 40s and 50s, because again, what little has been out there by historians suggests that the CIA basically did nothing in Hollywood in the 40s and 50s. That is not correct. We were able to really go through that with a fine-tooth comb, and it was very interesting. They were so quiet. They were so quiet behind the scenes, but partly because of their efforts, they were able to achieve two things. One, they made 3 films in 1946, which glorified the OSS, the forerunners to the CIA. And at least by the main historians, the original historians' own belief, laid out in a press release, the CIA might not even have existed were it not for that media terrain to be astroturfed at the very beginning, because it laid the groundwork for the CIA as heroic. And the second thing that the CIA was able to achieve from its inception until at least until well into the 60s was that it was simply not mentioned at all in any Hollywood production. Now, that might have been partly a cultural thing, but it was also partly that they were preventing that the mention simply of the 3-letter agencies being out there in movies. It was North by Northwest in 1959 by Alfred Hitchcock, where the acronym CIA was even first mentioned or shown in any Hollywood movie. And even then, they cut off the C on a piece of signage that's being shown. And really, it wasn't until well into the 60s that the CIA was acknowledged in cinema. In fact, it was I think it was the first James Bond film, Dr. No, in 1962, where the CIA is even mentioned in passing. And of course, then they're mentioned in a very laudatory way. So the CIA has been effective in Hollywood. It's not a uniquely different thing that's happened over the past sort of 25 years since Chase Brandon got involved. But they have certainly professionalized their involvement, and they've become more involved in actually shaping scripts from the outset in the past quarter century, whereas initially they were basically just preventing them even being anyone even being aware that they existed.